Compliance is a profession where people work tirelessly to make the world a better place. And there are hundreds of amazing and inspiring women who have helped the field develop into what it is today. Great Women in Compliance is part of the Compliance Podcast Network, so join Mary, Shirley, and Lisa Fine as they talk with women in compliance who are making a difference.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and I'm here with Lisa Fine and Mary Shirley, and we're here to talk about a new podcast that these ladies will be premiering on the Compliance Podcast Network. And for this introductory first podcast, I guess we'll call this Podcast Zero, because when you guys start, it'll be number one. We're going to talk about what brought you to the profession, your individual journeys, and most importantly, why you wanted to start a podcast about great women in compliance. So first of all, welcome to the Compliance Podcast Network, and welcome to podcasting, ladies.
Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you for having us become a part of the network. We're very excited.
Thanks, Tom. Really happy to be here.
So Lisa, why don't we start with you and introduce yourself and tell us how you got to where you are now.
Okay. I went to law school at Georgetown a bit longer ago than anyone cares to admit, and after that, I immediately went to a private law firm, a large law firm, and I did general litigation and also was part of our pro bono program. And then I was running that for several years. And during that period of time, I became very interested in doing the right thing. How do companies do that? Making sure that if you are in a position like a law firm or somewhere else like that, that you are able to help people and move certain things forward. After I left there, I ended up I took a little break after 8 years and went out to Park City, Utah and booked ski lessons, which is not the normal ultimate compliance path. But I was out there and I ended up working with the Disability Advocacy Organization. So it was another part of rights and doing the right thing to me. And then when I got back to Washington, D.C., I ended up starting to work at Gate Gourmet, also known as Gate Group. And for those listening, if you see the trucks with the basil leaves when you're traveling, that's Gate Gourmet and Gate Group. It's the largest independent airline catering company. I was hired there and I had an opportunity to get into employee relations and HR compliance. And I really fell in love with the compliance side, which seemed to be the conclusion of a lot of the other things along my path. It gave me the opportunity to have to make sure that the way we had regulatory concerns, values, our code of conduct, all part of what we did. The main thing I did my first few years, which has become a huge part of my career, is the investigations and implementing a global whistleblower hotline. So between those few areas, those two things have become some of my passion about this profession. And then at the same time, as I was able to meet members of this community, it really made me feel a part of something bigger and a group of people where we all are trying to do the right thing in many different contexts. And I both enjoy it from a professional standpoint and a personal professional standpoint because of the network and the community. So that's how I got here.
And Mary, I think people will probably discern when you start speaking that you're from somewhere east of us. So why don't you tell us how you got here?
Thanks, Tom. I'm originally from New Zealand, and despite being so far away, like Lisa, I started out in law school. And I would say, though, that I don't think that is the tried and true necessarily best way or the requirement for compliance. I think we have a lot of strong compliance professionals who didn't go to law school and took a different path. I worked for regulators in New Zealand in the areas of data privacy and antitrust and moved to Singapore after about 5 years. I took up a position as a legal and compliance counsel at Tata Communications, and that's where I got my start on the anti-bribery and corruption side of things. Thereafter, I found myself in Dubai as the head of compliance for Agreco, and by that point, in case you haven't already guessed, I got a bit of a taste for international living, learning more about other cultures and how that knowledge applies to and can hugely affect how you enforce or roll out your compliance program. after Dubai, I made my way back to Asia and worked in Hong Kong for a compliance consultancy company. And through that job, ended up finding a new position at Fresenius Medical Care, where I worked in the Hong Kong office, the Singapore office, and the Boston office, checking another continent off my list. So for me, the international side of things has probably been a fairly differentiating factor for how I tout myself as a compliance professional, having learned about the different cultures, not just from afar, but really having the boots on the ground experience and generally wanting to know more about my colleagues and what appeals to them when they're dealing with compliance practitioners and how I can better tailor my approach and my advice to suit them. Like Lisa, I really love the camaraderie of the compliance profession. And I think what started out as being something that was just my job has now inextricably become linked as part of my identity. I see myself as a compliance professional, not only in my professional life, but also in my personal life. And it's interesting that once you start seeing yourself like that, my friends as well view me as being heavily involved in and passionate about the compliance community and the discipline.
You know, it was really fascinating for both of you all about sort of obviously your individual journey, but Lisa, I wrote down that you said in many ways compliance was the conclusion, and a conclusion, I would just say probably a conclusion of the first part of your professional journey. And if I could draw upon my experience, I would equally say that compliance was a conclusion of the first part of my professional journey, really as a lawyer. And then when I moved to compliance as a lawyer, I began to see a much broader remit, a much broader picture, a much broader way to not only help corporations do business legally, but actually do business more efficiently and more profitably. So I was really intrigued by you seeing that as seeing that part of your journey as well. And Mary, in terms of what you have done in how, with your passion and how people, you see things through the lens of compliance, you see things through the lens of business, you see things with a much broader lens than with your professional training as a lawyer. I think both of your experiences will mirror many people's in the profession. And that's really the next question I wanted to lead with. We are recording this at the 2018 Society of Corporate Compliance and Ethics. Compliance and Ethics Institute is the largest compliance-related event across the globe each year. I think we have close to 1,800 in attendance. And for me, one of the great things is just to be around that many like-minded people at once. And everyone is a part of the solution. The vendors are part of the solution. The practitioners are the part of the solution. The commentators and podcasters are part of the solution. SCCE is part of the solution. And so I really wanted to ask you to reflect about, Mary, let's just start with you because you ended with this, about the profession and how the profession really works together in a way that certainly the legal profession doesn't work together across companies and probably other corporate disciplines as well.
So I think one of the facets for me as to why compliance is so compelling is that, you know, we're a non-regulated industry ourselves, and so and relatively immature compared to a lot of others, such as the legal fraternity. So for practicing compliance, there is not necessarily a set precedent or a set of rules as to how we're to go about practicing. And so one of the things that I have found really helpful and informative is talking with my colleagues in different compliance roles in other companies and asking them about certain issues that I might be bumping up against, of course, keeping that confidentiality where necessary and
Anonymity?
I wanted to say, and it's still not coming out, anonymizing.
Anonymizing.
The cases that I have to bounce ideas off people, do sanity checks. And I think the support of others in the profession has been so useful. Men and women alike in this particular profession have been, I think, probably more than most, willing to help someone when they have a question, to proactively provide support when they think of a way in which they might be able to assist you. And I have really benefited from that. I think that's what makes me feel so excited about this personally, is that you feel that support around you, particularly at these conferences that we're recording at now.
And Lisa?
I absolutely agree with everything that Mary's saying. I think one of the things that occurs is sometimes being a compliance professional can also be a little bit of a lonelier profession in your actual organization, because it's still growing and developing. It may be a smaller group. You may have different objectives, but you come to this community and you have this group at the SCCE or other places, and everyone has a similar objective, which is to help their companies do the right thing for the employees. Because of that, there's sort of a freedom to talk and work together and collaborate. And it's really unique and it's very powerful. We get this opportunity, and that's what I get a lot from this community. I'm sure anybody listening to this will sometimes think, I have to go to a conference or a meeting or something. You get here, you're excited, and it's not the location. It's not that. It's the people you can talk to and the questions you get answered and the candor. I mean, everyone is very, very, because we're compliance professionals, very aware that there's an appropriate way to speak about what happens in your business and what doesn't. But you can have a really frank conversation on best practices and come out with something tangible and make some friends who are like-minded in their professional journey, wherever they are in it.
There's another organization I belong to, and we always say that there is nothing that you are going through that someone else hasn't gone through. And if you don't know someone who hasn't gone through it, you can find someone who has. And that's really true of the compliance profession. But it's also true in terms of both of you all are, I think, absolutely spot on in terms of sharing best practices with other people. It is the most open profession in terms of that. You can call, my experience has been, you can call any compliance practitioner, say, I've got this issue, have you ever seen this? And they will either say, yes, I have, here's how we did it, or no, but I know someone who did, let me put you in touch with them. And so it's been a great way to learn and a great way for the profession to grow. But now let me turn to what I find the most exciting, which is, let's just tell the story. Last night at an event, you two came up to me and said, Tom, we want to start a podcast and we want to talk about great women in compliance. And I said, wow, that's great. So why don't you tell me how you came up with the idea and what you hope to accomplish with this series?
Sure. So this is not at all aimed at taking away any of the great contributions by the men in our profession. I've learned so much from men just like Tom Fox, in fact. The idea of this was really to understand and acknowledge that for women in I guess pretty much all industries, there is still a glass ceiling, and we continue to bump up against that. And while there are initiatives aimed at remediating that issue, I feel there's a bit of artificiality surrounding situations where we insert women in positions just because we need to check a box. I believe that women should be seen in business. I believe that they have a huge part to play. But I want it to be known that women have earned that position. And so the idea of this podcast was really to showcase the immense amount of talent that we have from the women in the profession, as well as the support that they give each other, the support we've received from men in the profession. And of course, we all work together. But the idea of this was really just to promote and bring to the fore some of the strong women that we have around us, our mentors, our peers, our subordinates whose stars continue to rise, and give that a little bit of exposure, whilst of course acknowledging the amazing men that we work with as well.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of when we started talking about this, it was a group of women and men, and everyone thought it was a great idea and was very supportive. I think that there are unique challenges to being a woman, as Mary said, in every profession. I also think a community of women, to build that, is really a useful exercise for being mentors or mentoring, because I mean, I believe everybody has, you have your network, and the more diverse it is in any way is good. But also women do suffer or deal with unique challenges in offices anywhere, we'd be remiss to not mention the Me Too era that's coming up, that we're in now. How do we handle that? How do we help younger women who are newer in the career navigate for it personally, and how to handle it in a company, depending on who they're dealing with? You may have a very junior woman compliance officer dealing with some very senior complaints or issues. And I think that was one of the biggest reasons, and to develop this network going forward so that there is a place to go and that people can hear the different career paths and the interesting work that women are doing in this field, because there are some tremendous women that have really led this whole profession. So I think that's pretty much why I wanted to do that. And there was one other thing I did want to mention. The company that I'm working in, what is very international, and it's European based. And one point that was interesting for me is, as an American woman going in and dealing with a very male dominated leadership team in Europe, it's always interesting to sort of think about, and this is not unique to Europe or my country or any particular countries, it could be anywhere. How do you deal with things in the current political environment as a woman, as an American? And I just think that those are also really interesting experiences for those in global organizations to share.
Well, ladies, I am extraordinarily excited that you have decided to start this podcast. I cannot wait to see where you take it. I think it's going to be fabulous. I think that it will be a resource for obviously women, but frankly for the entire compliance community as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. We're very excited.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Great Women in Compliance. We hope you'll join us in honoring the great women in the compliance field by subscribing to this podcast and leaving a review.